Our next speaker is a former member of our board of directors and a wonderful supporter of the Chesterton Society. And he said to me, "Dale, if I give you a big donation, can I speak at the conference?" And I said, "Absolutely not." No, what I said is that we won't take your money. All right, no. Brent is a former magician who still has a few tricks up his sleeve, which you'll see one of his magic tricks tomorrow at the closing banquet. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. He lives in Vero Beach, Florida, where this guy's retired, his children are grown and gone, and he's helping start a Chesterton Academy in Vero Beach, Florida. Yeah. That's great. He used to own a dog that had 3 heads, and when I was a guest at his house, he told me, now, usually I can hear the dog sleeping next to me, and if for some reason the dog wakes up during the night and comes into your bedroom, I will wake up eventually because I'll hear that the dog's not breathing heavily next to me. But just when the dog climbs up on the bed and gets on top, you just lie very still until I get there. And now he's giving a talk about being a failed animal trainer. And the title of the talk, very appropriately describing me right now, running on empty. Please welcome Brent Forrest.
Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. There's a lot more to the dog story that he's not telling. He's one of the few people I know that really does have a hard time with dogs. And I said, why? Everybody likes dogs. He said, well, dogs like me too much because they bite me. And he said, when I was young, a dog bit me, and I was traumatized by it. And he said, I've been scared of dogs ever since. And he said, later on, I was at somebody's house, and they had a dog, and I was kind of cautious. And they said, oh, don't worry, he wouldn't he wouldn't bite anybody. And that dog bit him again, right? It's a new dog biting you. Now, here's what a lot of dog lovers think about this. First time could be a fluke, okay? But see, dogs essentially are a judge of character. Maybe there's something we're missing here. But, I was going to put him on the screen. Can you see the picture of this big black dog? Can you see this thing? Yeah, that's a Mastiff named Marlowe. And a Saturday morning many years ago, I was in Adoration on a Saturday morning. I had a free day. And I left Adoration. It was a gorgeous day, and I thought, well, what should I do? Go get something to eat, go home, take a nap. I'm big on naps. And so I went over to the Humane Society, and I had a dog. I always adopted dogs. And I had a dog that had died a few months earlier. So I went to the Humane Society, and the way I go there to avoid feeling guilty, I walk dogs. They love it when you do that. I go in, you got any dogs need walking? You got any dogs they've been here a long time, don't get a lot of attention? So I take the dog walking, And that way, if I make the day nice for the dog, Dale, then I don't feel bad if I leave, without adopting. So anyway, I was leaving. I walked several dogs, and there was an empty room that was now full, and this big black behemoth he's a Mastiff. He's a Corsican, Cane Corso Mastiff. He had been hit by a car and left for dead on the highway. He also had buckshot in his rear end. Probably been around some of Dale's relatives somewhere. Anyway, he and I bonded right away. He had been hit in the hip, but I did volunteer work, and I gave money to the Humane Society, yeah. But they didn't invite me to speak. It's the last dollar I'm giving them. Anyway, they patched the dog up. And it happened to be the 90th day of his 90-day quarantine. I was the first person to see him when he was available for adoption. And we all love dogs. We all have dog stories, but there's that one dog in your life, and this guy was it. I named him Philip Jacob Marlowe III. The girls at my office called him Jake. Dale called him Sir. He was gentle. What you love about, he didn't jump on people, never barked. We'd have our Chesterton Society meetings, and I'd tell him, listen, and I always loved him. He was just gentle, easy, never raised his voice, didn't fuss at people, didn't bark, didn't carry on. But I have a big leather club chair and an ottoman, and I just tell the guys, that's his chair, okay? And it is true, the story about the night that Dale stayed at the house. He didn't tell it exactly right. First off, the dog didn't sleep beside me. He's too big. He had a bed on the floor, but he snores loudly, or he did. Loud snoring. And I said, Dale, when I realize that the dog isn't snoring, I'll know that he's made a run through the house and he's probably gone to find you. And the latch on the guest room door is one of those that's a little creaky, and you push it and the door will open, and the dog knows that. So I said, if he gets on the bed, just lie real still. He's sweet, he's harmless. You just don't want to upset him, whatever you do. The ladies here all need sweaters and shawls, and all I do is sweat. I'm going to take this jacket off, if I may. Oh, very good. Thank you. I'm honored, sir. Thank you. Now, I have several talks. Is it in there, my wallet? Yeah. I was lucky the introduction I got from him, because he's got some slings and arrows to throw at people, you know. I have several talks. I don't know which one you're going to get. I hope you get one of the good ones. I was at a funeral recently. I grew up in Fort Myers, Florida, which is on the Gulf Coast, and a fourth-generation Floridian. Fourth-generation Floridian, we're Southerners. We're deep South people. My grandparents, great-grandparents, and so forth. And I grew up in Fort Myers, tons of family there, but I was away for many years, and I was going to move back to retire there, but it's too crowded. It's the old line of, nobody goes to Fort Myers. It's just way too crowded, you know. Anyway, excuse me, I went there for a funeral, and came back from the funeral not long ago, and I heard, so funerals give us a chance to have a family reunion, you see. So we say, who's going to die next so we can have another family reunion, you know? I have an interesting family. I'll bet each one of you has an interesting family. My cousin, first cousin, said, well, you know, Brent, I started drinking again. I said, really? Yeah, I had to. I had to start drinking again. You see, it was the only way that I could honestly boycott Bud Light. You have to admire a man like that. I mean, how many people do you know with that degree of discipline and self-control, you know? It's the kind of genetic material that I come from. That's my family, you know. The talk is running on empty, the priceless gift of failure. I hope you like it, because then it will be a good talk. And if you don't like it, I will have failed and hence given you a priceless gift. You know, this thing is going to be a patchwork, and my digressions have digressions. And it's possible that I just have early dementia, but you just bear with me on that. Incidentally, the cup of convenience usually applies to people when they're traveling here. I've heard already a bunch of stories of people had a rough time getting here. And I think anyone who came through the Orlando International Airport ought to get a cup of inconvenience of their own, just automatically. See, I went through that thing. The Orlando Airport is slightly larger than the state of Vermont. Yeah. Given the choice, would you go to prison or go to Orlando International Airport? Go to prison. It's easier to get in and out of prison, much faster. Yeah. And the people at the prison who, like the ones at the airport, the ones who have uniforms and badges at the prison will treat you with much greater courtesy. So there is a distinguished order born Emily Durotstein says it was born in my swimming pool, which is a fun story, even if it's not true. It's called the Knights of the Society of Gilbert Keith Chesterton. And I happened to be one of the knights, and when it started, I was flattered because they recognized me as a white horse knight. I'm a knight of the white horse. And then I learned it was only a halfway award, and I had been recognized as the rear half of the horse. Thank you, Dale. The front half of that horse belonged to a great man, my dear friend, Dr. Stuart Colner, a great Chestertonian who passed away not long ago and way too soon. He was the only man that could threaten Charlie Reese. Where is Charlie Reese anyway? He's hiding out, right? He's here, Charlie. He was the only guy that could threaten you in a Clarihue contest, but we've lost him. Now here's what I'm thinking, Charlie. Whether he's in purgatory or paradise, Stuart is working on some out-of-this-world Clarihues to stun you with when you get there. Assuming you get there. Yeah, we sure hope you make it, Charlie. She's already been recognized today, but I'm going to do this again. And she says she's shy and doesn't like to be embarrassed. She's strong as an iron rod. This is a powerful lady. Dr. Colner's wife of many years, Barbara Colner, who's just a fine Catholic lady. She is here with us. She has been courageous. She has suffered much with the loss of her husband. Where are you hiding from me, Barbara? Darling, right there, the redhead right there. That's Barbara Colner. Please give a hand for her, just for Barbara, right? All right, that matters. Great. I always like to tell this. I haven't started my talk yet, Dale. You understand that. It's just, we'll get there. So, whenever I talk, especially if I'm going to speak at a conference like this, I always am very, very careful to tell the truth. I mean, that matters. I take great pains to tell the truth. It's just the facts I sometimes have trouble with. Now, before any of you slip out to the bar, I will tell you already, this will not be a long talk, so you can get to the bar early. I have one critical takeaway, and it really matters. This is my takeaway. And I gave this the last time I had a talk. I gave the same takeaway because it's just too good. You may want to write it down, but whatever you do, memorize it. And I can assure you it's like a mustard seed. If you'll let this little phrase drop down into the soil of your spiritual life, I assure you this has mustard seed power. Here it is. While God always answers our prayers, God always answers our prayers, He is not very good at taking instruction. There's much more wisdom in that than you might realize on the surface. I am the least educated, least credentialed speaker you will see on this platform all weekend. I think that may be obvious already. It is not mock modesty. I have an undergraduate degree in journalism from a private southern college in Lakeland, Florida, not a pedigree place. Journalism degree. I have never worked for a newspaper or any news organization of any kind. So at least I've been able to preserve some degree of innocence. So, why am I up here? Well, I bribed Dale. I said, how much money do I have to get? No, I said, Dale, I have an idea that I think I've got a really good talk for this year's conference about St. Francis. And Dale said, well, Brent, what do you know about St. Francis? And I said, well, not much. But I don't think he had very good personal hygiene. Naturally, Dale found that answer perfectly satisfying. Yeah, so I'm up here. A lot of you know this, but I have to emphasize it. I came in late in life. I was baptized 11 years ago. I'm a Chestertonian convert. Oh, thank you. You know, I'm glad I lived long enough to come into the church. It was a home that I have been homesick for all my life and did not know it. But I was baptized 11 years ago. I'm definitely a Chestertonian convert. And the most amazing thing is that next thing I knew, I was sort of drawn into this organization, and I've gotten to know these amazing people, both front stage and backstage. Backstage is interesting anywhere you go. I love these people. Dale is a scholar, truly a great scholar. He's good-humored and like your next-door neighbor, friendly guy, but he is the world's leading exponent of everything to do with G.K. Chesterton. I mean, he is a walking encyclopedia, and he's a brilliant scholar, and that's not a joke. He's one of the most gifted speakers I've ever known. I call him Johnny Carson, if you're old enough to remember who Johnny Carson is, back when late night comedy was funny. Remember? Back when that's been a long time. So Dale has spoken at Cornell, Yale, Columbia University, Notre Dame, Oxford, the Vatican Forum, whatever that is. He has spoken at the House of Lords in London. And Dale, have you noticed, you've spoken at all these places and not a one of them has invited you back. Was it Oxford or the House of Lords that dared you to come back? Yeah. This will not be a long presentation. It may be, in fact, halfway over already. He's sitting here because he has the crook, never mind. I promise not to use the words "at the end of the day," nor will I say that anyone was thrown under a bus. Sometimes that brings a hand of applause, but that's tough. Don't you get a load out? Only the most important and brilliant people on television say that. I mean, you have to be like a 5-star general or a news anchor, a political commentator, but at the end of the day, and then you just wait for the wisdom, They threw him under the bus. How many times have you heard that, Bugs me. So anyway, at the end of the day has nothing to do with the end of any day. It's an idiom. And we used to say, when all is said and done. Remember that? When all is said and done, which is what it means when all is said and done. And then the bus thing, I don't know how that works. But, I mean, are we all in the bus? If you get mad at somebody, how do you throw them under the bus if we're all in the bus, Is the bus moving? Or is it just parked somewhere? I don't think these people are hearing what they just say it, It's like, first person heard it, thought it was clever 55 years ago. And anyway, I will say this one thing that I am sure of. There is one thing I do believe. When all is said and done, there's a lot more said than done. Yeah. I grew up in the South, what Flannery O'Connor called the Christ-haunted South. Just about everybody there believed in Jesus. We all had different opinions about him. Why did Flannery O'Connor use the word haunted? I'm not quite sure, but it's poetic and it makes sense to a Southerner. Maybe it's because the third person of the Trinity was never referred to as the Holy Spirit. Our preachers all called him the Holy Ghost. I think that's King James too, maybe. I'm not being flippant and I'm not being disrespectful when I say that the Holy Ghost did in fact haunt the Deep South that I grew up in. My long deceased, I told a story a couple of years back about my grandmother, Morning Singletary, the only woman in the world that has the name Morning, like the dawn. Well, her husband was known as W.F. Singletary. We kids called him Granddaddy Bill. And so he was married to Morning, but Granddaddy Bill, he ran a little general store, but on the weekends, he was a preacher. He had a third-grade education. He was a self-appointed, self-anointed, self-educated Pentecostal preacher of the gospel, also known as a Holy Ghost preacher. He only read and trusted one book, the King James Bible, didn't trust any other translation, said they're going to keep changing it a little at a time. I tell you. I was 5 years old. Picture me, 5 years old, little kid, not even first grade, and I was sitting down front, and he was on a platform like this. And I was mesmerized. He was marching up and down, sweating and shouting and preaching. And he had a Bible, a soft cover Bible, and he held it open and flapped it like a bird. Have you ever seen that done? If you're a deacon or a priest, pastor, you actually do homilies. I suggest you get a soft leather cover Bible. And if you have a weak spot in your sermon, just wave that thing. Like people just, that was the most wonderful talk. I don't know what he said, but oh, he's so profound, filled with the Spirit. Yeah. My grandfather took a traditional little old folding metal chair and slung it over his shoulder, and he continued to march up and down. And then he slung his right leg over the altar rail and continued to preach. I was right there, you know. I knew right then and there that religion was going to play a very big part in my life, and so it has. It's been 55 years before I would enter to the Catholic Church, and it would be an incredible journey into many places. God had certainly not yet called me into any faith, but he had certainly introduced me to show business, and I never got over that. You got to admit, that's pretty good raising for a kid, isn't that something? Let's jump to Bishop Barron. His homily at the Mass yesterday afternoon actually contained the very essence of this talk. I sat there and said, I don't need to give this talk. He did it 10 times better than I could. Years ago, I saw him give this talk about the 4 Ps. And I want to talk about success so I can talk about failure, okay? And he said there are four Ps: prosperity, pleasure, power, and prestige. And these 4 sum up what human beings on this planet believe constitute success, particularly the prosperity part. And it's true, if you go down the list, we want money, we want pleasure, we don't want pain, and we want power, or at least agency. It doesn't mean you want to be the most powerful person in the world, but you want to be able to, like if you can't control your kids, you don't have any power. You need agency or power. And then, of course, prestige. You say, well, I'm not egotistical, but all of us want a good reputation. And if people slander you or say nasty things about you that aren't true, which is what Mark Johnson has done for me many times, well, we won't talk about Mark Johnson. You can read his column in Gilbert Magazine. So I came up with just trying to be creative, I came up with a 5th P. Oh, and by the way, the sermon was brilliant, his whole talk about the Ps. And I'll tell you how it ends shortly, but it was so good, I thought, you know what, he stole that from Fulton Sheen, you know, who probably stole it from G.K. Chesterton by way of C.S. Lewis, you know. Anyway, I came up with the 5th P, and I think it fits. Progress, you know. And besides, if you have the 4th, don't you just want more, you know? And of course, this is a big Chestertonian theme because in our world, progress and the word progressive just automatically means good, right, and true. How dare you argue against it? How could you be such a Neanderthal? I'm a progressive. That means I'm on the right side of things. But we don't question what are we progressing toward. And Mr. Chesterton was brilliant with that. You know, my fun was Hitler says, you know, this week we dropped 100 bombs on London. Next week we expect to drop 200 bombs on London. And 3 to 4 weeks out, we hope to drop many, many, many more. We're making a lot of progress in our war effort, but then we always have been very progressive. I'm progressing. I've chewed off 9 fingernails. I'm down to 1. There's progress for you. 1937, coming out of the Great Depression, the country saw a book on the newsstands of bookstores called Think and Grow Rich by a man named Napoleon Hill. Okay? This is a bestseller. How many of you know of that book, Think and Grow Rich? Yeah, 1937. Now, I understand publishers say that the title often just sells the book, but this is so perfect. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I mean, how could you not want that? That thing sold decade after decade, 20 million copies before the turn of the century, and they quit counting. It's still in print. You can buy a brand new copy to this very day. It launched a literary genre, the self-help movement, the personal achievement movement, the positive thinking movement. And it's sort of an industry all unto itself with a huge, deep, lasting influence on our culture, shapes the way how we think about success and how we think about wealth. It's listed among the top-selling business books of the last 75 years. Mr. Hill claimed to have discovered the science of personal achievement. See, back then people were following the science also, see. He said, you know why you have to follow the science? Because it keeps moving on you. You know what I'm saying? I don't even need to fill in the blanks on that because you all know where that is. You all know, excuse me, yeah. There's no scotch in that. That's too bad. Well, he said that he had discovered all these secrets of success, and he interviewed the multi-zillionaire Andrew Carnegie. He said he interviewed Thomas Edison. We find out many, many years later, he never met with any of these famous people. And the guy that wrote the book, Think and Grow Rich, The Secret of Wealth, borrowed $300 from his brother in order to be able to have the time and money to write the book. And he never paid the $300 back. Anyway, here were the principles. It was have an intense desire, set goals, write down goals, pictures, make specific goals. Plan, you must plan. He said, if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. Have unrelenting optimism, and above all, you must believe in yourself. You must believe in your power to do these things. Positive affirmations daily, visualization, self-auto-suggestion, kind of like self-hypnosis. Y'all know about this stuff, you've heard this. Persistence in the face of failure, and the greatest one of all, he called the law of attraction. What you most think about, what you most desire, it will manifest in your life. Y'all ever heard any of this philosophy? Maybe you haven't been out in the business world where I've been, because this stuff is huge out there. How's that? Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. They warned me I would have hecklers, but. You know, they had that book that was out in a movie, or what it called The Secret, you know? And I didn't see it, but I know it's all about the law of attraction, you know? And the motivation, and when I was coming up, and then later in business, I was exposed to this a lot. One time I was working for a brief time for Southwestern Bell Corporation, and they pulled all their employees in the sales division and the marketing division, pulled them all off the line to sit in a 2-day class of a motivational speaker. And everything that guy said was just a rehash of exactly what's in this book. And the thing he kept saying, you will become whatever you think about all day long. And my buddy said, I'm going to become a woman. Yeah. I'm glad you're laughing, because nowadays it's not a good joke in every group. You know that. A lot of places you can't play that joke. You really can't. Anyway, Hill quoted Emerson, and he quoted William James, and he quoted, of course, Benjamin Franklin. And he had very impressive quotes from these people, but essentially I learned they were all misquotes, because later when I was actually reading the real stuff, it was very abusive of those guys. And I'm going to give you a quote from William James toward the end, if I ever get to the end, and then you'll understand, I'll save him from these people. Anyway, thousands of books followed. Dale Carnegie wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People, but the big blowout, in 1952, a minister named Norman Vincent Peale published a book called The Power of Positive Thinking. Y'all still with me on this? Am I keeping? Okay. Another good title. The title matters, Dale. I may have to cut this off at the end, but I have these asides, you know. In 1988, I was in the investment business for many years, and I went to a conference in Cape Cod. And they had a speaker there, And he was there. He'd written this book called Wealth in America. And they brought him in. They said, we want to teach all you investment guys how to go find the money. You know, if you're going to get people to invest, you got to find out who's got the money. And this man had done this research, and it was a very dull book. I mean, academic, but Wealth in America, a study. But what he ended up saying was, look, the guys with all the ritzy houses and a lot of those guys, all they're doing is making payments. And the little fellow down the street with a 20-year-old Oldsmobile, and he runs a laundromat, that guy's probably a millionaire, And so he did all of this study on it, and he was the funniest speaker. He was a great speaker. But the book, nobody wanted the book, Years later, someone said to him, why don't we call it The Millionaire Next Door? He revised the book, made it a little more chatty, mega bestseller. Dale, there's something in that, It doesn't matter much what's on the inside. It's the covers that sell a lot. Oh, pick it up, Brent. Here. Theologians laughed. They said of Vincent Peale, said, Paul is appealing, but Peale is appalling, And he was. He just had his feel-good gospel. There was no cross. There was no blood. There was no suffering. God wants you to feel happy and alive. Anyway, he handed this baton to a quasi-Presbyterian pastor named Robert Schuller, who repackaged this as a self-esteem gospel. These guys sort of baptized this positive thinking movement, and they wrapped it with Christ around it and so forth. Today, we have the epitome. This thing kind of has a way of, it's like compound interest. It just keeps reaching, doubling and doubling, to the point now that we have Joel Osteen, who is a bewitching charmer, and he has taken success and prosperity gospel to unimaginable heights. He has millions of followers and many times more than that in dollars. They say he's worth somewhere south of $500 million and rising. But getting rich is consistent with his theology. I read those earlier books when I was a kid, and I learned from them, and they helped me. And my father, who had no significant education, said, these are good books. They had some good advice in them. They wanted you to work and take responsibility for your life for the most part. I think they helped millions of people. I really actually do that. This is the stuff of the American dream. Good advice, encouragement, and a lot of it worked if you just applied it and went to the effort to keep it going. So why do I speak so well of it? Well, the whole business is attractive, defensible, and heretical. I used to think in my ignorance that heresies are wicked stuff, like, people burning stuff of Satan's worship in the middle of the night, which is satanic. That's heretics. And that, it isn't anything at all. I learned late in life, reading Chesterton, that heresies are good things. They're beautiful things. They're strong things. They're appealing things. They're virtues. They're easy to defend. They're easy to believe in. And they are born out of Christian virtues. The best virtues are all in the Christian religion. But when the virtues are broken away from the whole, our religion is it's an incredibly difficult thing for anyone to master, because it almost consists of huge contradictions, massive contradictions, that only become manageable when they're seen as paradoxes. Because there are unimaginably difficult, like the Bible talks about the mercy and the grace of God, like this ocean where the worst sin is just a little drop, and then you go to another line and it's like, oh my gosh, if I don't toe the line, it's going to be really easy to go to hell. It's going to be really hard. The justice and demands for perfection and the unlimited grace and mercy, for me, those are contradictory, and I cannot play them both very well at the same time. But that is what the gospel is. When you take the virtues away and break them away, Chesterton says it's not the vices cause trouble. The virtues run wild, and ultimately they do grave harm. And so in the end, a gospel that has a lot of truth and good, that is not the whole gospel, becomes an evil. And that is exactly what Bishop Barron said the other night when he said, if you have anything that is above God in your life, it will end up destroying you, whether it's money or sex, or even your own spirituality. That's what he actually said that we can sometimes, our spirituality can be an idol in our lives. And that one's amazing. And so the feel-good gospel does that. I'm pumping it up. I said, where this thought said, is it possible that you could be before the tabernacle, before Jesus Christ, quietly in the tabernacle, standing, prayerful, giving thanks to God, thanking God, I thank you, God, praising him and thanking him, and still be rather seriously sinning in his eyes? Is that possible? Yes, there's a story. I thank thee, O Lord, that I'm not like that loser sitting over there. Sound familiar? Jesus has every angle covered. All right. Virtues. These are virtuous words: diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those are virtues that have run wild, and they have been taken away from the whole gospel, and therefore they are doing great damage. Partial truth is far more deceptive and dangerous than any lie. Now here's one, we'll go with this, and before, let's see how, we started late. We got a few more minutes, right? But 2, 3. I'm going to argue with you. Greatest gifts, greatest treasures in life are things we could have never imagined. We could have not made a picture and put it on the refrigerator. That's my yacht. I'm going to have that yacht. The greatest things we ever get in life are surprises. They're things we couldn't have set as goals because we didn't even know what they are. Fellas fall in love with a girl. How could you put a picture of a woman up there that was the woman you're going to fall in love with? Only God does those things. The saintly priest that baptized me, I was 60 years old. 59. I was 59, much younger. Only an act of God could have made me a Catholic. The saintly priest who baptized me said, so you've been Catholic all your life, and you're just now figuring it out. I've been a Chestertonian all my life, and I've just figured it out, which is amazing. All the lives of the saints, Abraham's journey, Joseph being sold into slavery, everything in the Bible are these amazing stories of not knowing where the heck we're going and failing pretty much all the way. Even Emerson said, a man never rises so high as when he knows not where he is going. Dale Ahlquist hasn't been known where he's been going for years. And I mean that literally. They had a book society, a book club, the literary society, and they had an unplanned pregnancy, which is called the Chesterton Schools Network. It's true. I know, I'm trying to keep it in the tube. I'm sorry, but this is good material. I got to tell them. So these guys started this out of necessity. They said, we can't get a good Catholic school. Well, let's start our own Catholic school. They want to do it just because of their own children. It was an absurd idea. And if they knew how hard it was going to be, they wouldn't have done it probably. Jesus tells the story of count the cost before you build the tower. I always thought that was prudence because I was in the investment business. Save your money, count the cost, be prudent. And it's like, better not do anything with too much risk. But when you're working for God, counting the cost means the cost is going to be everything you got. It's everything you've got. And these guys, like Emily Rothstein over here, and her wonderful husband, Nestor Rothstein, people like Nancy Brown, I shouldn't name names because then I'll be leaving people out. Laura Ahlquist, of course. They sacrificed and gave year after year. And the story of that network is a lot like EWTN and Mother Angelica. This thing has been a sloppy mess, broke, failing, as long as I've known anything about it. They made me the treasurer. Serious. You talk about money, that's all we did was talk about it because there wasn't any, This thing has grown and grown. I promise. I just can't help myself. I'm sorry. To this day, the schools have no sophisticated marketing machinery whatsoever. In many ways, I hope they never do. This is subsidiarity at its best. Everything is close to the ground. Parents do this. We have one of the best reputations for a Catholic school anywhere in the country. And every time we open a new one, it costs more money. We don't know where it's coming from. Always running on empty. Always running on empty. You understand? And you don't know where you're going. That's what God likes to do. That's when we know we are failing in the way that God would have us fail. And that's the priceless gift of failure. The Israelites, I'll skip this. Y'all knew, they collected the manna every morning. And they got smart. They got really clever and smart. Like they read Think and Grow Rich and said, let's take some big bags out. We'll fill it with the manna, and then we can sleep in tomorrow. Okay? And the manna rotted. They couldn't keep it. They had to eat one day at a time. They had to go out and collect what God gave them one day at a time. And this is my last point. I believe anything in virtue life, I could build muscle if I weren't so lazy. You can do stuff. You can build up. You can save money. You can build a reputation. You can build virtuous habits. You can do a lot of good things. But it is my belief that you cannot build up, collect, or save up spirituality and grace. I'm just taking it from Father Bishop Barron. I have more to say, but it's not as good as what I've already said. And I think you understand the idea. This is what I mean. I have lots of great material, but let's go have some beers later, and I'll give you the rest of it and do some magic tricks, all right? God bless you. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Very good. Very, very good. Hello, hello. All right.